Learning outcomes. Why the focus on course learning outcomes? Outcomes or objectives. Do they reflect an equal pathway to student success? Whose perspective is being represented on the course syllabus? Are you framing your course syllabus from an instructor perspective or from a student perspective? If you're framing it from an instructor perspective, you're probably using learning objectives. Course learning objectives explain what the instructor is responsible for in the course, and it should be linked to one's teaching philosophy and be manifested in one's teaching style. Again, it's teacher-centered and it's instructor statements guiding the path towards the learning outcomes. So an example then would be, as an instructor, I will provide opportunities for my students to understand the difference between learning objectives and learning outcomes, recognize the benefits of learning objectives, recognizing the benefits of learning outcomes, and allowing students to engage in meaningful learning through critical thinking regarding learning objectives. As you see, this is from an instructor's perspective. Now, if you have a stronger focus on learning outcomes, you're framing it from a student perspective, and it describes significant and essential learning that the learners achieved, and it's focused on student learning. It's student-centered. Learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of a course or program. The knowledge, skills, and values that are needed by the graduate of the program link to program outcomes and graduate attributes. Learning outcomes are statements of what a learner is expected to know, understand, and or be able to demonstrate after completion of a process of learning. Some of the benefits of a learning outcome is that it helps instructors communicate to students more precisely what is expected of them. Helps students to learn more effectively, the curriculum is made more open to them. Helps instructors to design their material more effectively by providing a map or pathway. It assists instructors in choosing appropriate teaching strategies and it assists in setting assessments based on materials delivered. It integrates the course design through integrating student needs, instructor expertise, and disciplinary requirements. The benefit of a learning outcome is that they're measurable. They also acknowledge relationship of evidence to conclusion. In most cases, by using learning outcomes, it will lead to the deep learning within a program. It increases transparency, and overall, it will increase teaching effectiveness. When you're writing a learning outcome, you begin each learning outcome with an action verb, followed by the object of the verb, followed by a phrase that gives the context. You use only one verb per learning outcome. The learning outcomes must be observable and measurable, and ensure that the learning outcomes are capable of being assessed. There's 3 types of learning outcomes that are designated from Bloom's taxonomy, and these are the knowledge, value, and skills. So by using learning outcomes, you can divide your course content into what sort of learning the student is demonstrating, or the student is gathering. The cognitive or the knowledge one would look at such things as they're analyzing, they're evaluating, they're demonstrating knowledge or comprehension. So an example could be analyzing a lifestyle plan for the following components. A type of learning outcome would be a value outcome, and that will look at the student's attitudes, feelings, and values. So an example would be value the need for confidentiality within the professional-client relationship. And then the third type of learning outcome is a skill outcome. And these use verbs such as apply, adapt, adjust. So an example could be design a lifestyle plan that includes. Why these are helpful is that when you're planning your course syllabi, as an instructor, you want to know where you are. What are you looking at within your course? Are there any constraints? And once you understand your constraints, you're going to ask, where do you want your students to go? So what are these outcomes? And how are you going to assess that the students get there? And so you're thinking more about sort of a backwards thinking of, this is the outcome, this is how I'm going to assess to see the outcome, and how am I going to get the students to this outcome? Other ways that it helps with the course syllabi is it asks, what do the students need? And how will you let the students know what you are planning? And then, what is the overall scheme of learning activities? How are you integrating course design or instructional strategy within the course? To practice writing learning outcomes, a statement such as, by the end of this course or program or lab, students are expected to, this is where you can insert a verb, the context, and a content that the student will be achieving by the end of the course. So, an example of a knowledge, by the end of this course, students are expected to analyze a proposal for the following components. An example of a value outcome, by the end of this course, students are expected to value the need for confidentiality within the professional-client relationship. And then as last example of a skill learning outcome is, by the end of this course, students are expected to apply the principles of program planning and design in the areas of health promotion. By using a rubric, you can map how your learning outcomes will be assessed. For example, the skill outcome, if they showed a familiarity, they would be within a minimal pass. And by doing this, you can see where the student may need help with a certain type of outcome, or whether or not that outcome actually is being assessed within your course. And again, you can, by implementing projects or assignments, you can see how these outcomes are again being assessed and they're being practiced within the course. For example, then, a project might have a cognitive, might have a value, and it might have a skill outcome within the whole project. And so you can see then that this student is receiving certain types of learning outcomes by just doing this project, and how this project would be assessed to receive a minimal or a exceptional mark. Now, looking at this then, you can see that these course outcomes are mapped right to the graduate outcomes or the graduate attributes that a school or that an overall program has assigned. So there could be knowledge attributes, integrity, skill attributes, and these will all be mapped to the end of the program. And so you know that your graduates are going to leave the program with these skills. There has been talk that learning outcomes are dangerous, that they're too narrow, they're too prescriptive, and they have much debate on some of the impacts of these learning outcomes. They say that it's an attempt to abolish ambiguity, making the courses too narrow. And four main arguments against these learning outcomes is that it erodes the uncertainty that allows for the class to maybe flourish on. By making a class too predictable, you might be diminishing then this learning process. It inhibits then any type of situation where a student or a teacher has to deal with uncertainty. A third is that it devalues the art of teaching by being this linear approach. And the fourth is that some say that it breeds cynicism and irresponsible behavior within a school. By flipping these arguments around, you can see that learning outcomes actually do the opposite. In fact, learning outcomes strengthen the relationship through instructors and teachers by allowing for confidence and trust. And learning outcomes can lead to creativity by having the capacity to experiment and deviate off the pathway, as they have this confidence in them where they feel confident. If they make a mistake, that's fine. Learning outcomes enhance teaching by valuing diversity. They allow for courses to be designed by acknowledging different learning styles. And so the teaching and the learning is congruent. There's a congruency throughout the course design. And the last argument, flipping that around, is that actually it leads to being responsible, as the teachers are acting in the students' best interests. So learning outcomes or learning objectives, it's depending on how you frame them. So accepting that student motivation is an essential element in learning, we propose that those who teach should begin to reclaim learning outcomes and begin to frame them more broadly and flexibly, to allow for demonstrations and expressions of appreciation, enjoyment, and even pleasure within the learning process. Looking at assessment and linking the pathway from outcomes to assessment, is this siloing and narrowing and funneling the student? And so there is this loss. No. If you reframe this, in fact, it will widen up and lead to a more innovative society and holistic schooling by taking the pathway of outcomes and showing that by using different learning styles and innovative ways and using rubrics to show how assessment can expand the learning process, it will lead to a better learning and more effective learning process. So some concluding thoughts. Can you overcome this narrow focus of assessment? Yes. By funneling and turning that around and making the process a widening learning process, then yes, you're going to overcome any loss. And with loss of creativity, by looking at different ways to teach or different ways to frame something, the creativity will be expanded. And the creativity will be expanded as well through students having the confidence to experiment within the class as they know where they're headed and what the outcome is to be.